Hello, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. Today is a very important video that I wanted to sit down and make. It's kind of my inspiration for just getting into YouTube. Is when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I of course went to YouTube and tried to see if anybody had vlogged about it, or if anybody had like a sit-down video about their personal experience, and I didn't find one. There were more like clinical clips and maybe people explaining what bipolar disorder was, but there wasn't any videos of like somebody sharing their personal experience, what their day-to-day is like, breaking down the symptoms. So I wanted to create a channel where you get to see how my bipolar disorder impacts my day-to-day life, because it takes away the stigma, right? These big, scary symptoms that people associate with bipolar disorder. When you are undergoing treatment and when you are taking care of your mental health, bipolar disorder is a very manageable illness. So yeah, I debated how do I go about this? Like, do I want to share my story, like how I came to get a diagnosis? Do I want to draw from inspiration of music that I feel like encapsulates bipolar disorder perfectly? An artist I really admire is Halsey, and their album, Manic, is a perfect description of what it's like to experience a mixed episode. That album is very Alice in Wonderland-esque. Like, there's no real through line. It's not clean cut. It's not just like one specific theme. It's kind of everything happening at once, but things going as slow as possible. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I will do a breakdown of the album and kind of share how I relate to each song and how I feel like each song describes an episode really well. But ultimately, I decided I am just going to pick different aspects of the disorder. You might see me do these segments on different days because honestly, it's a lot to share and it can be heavy, and I have to be mindful of keeping my mental health in check. So, all of that said, the first thing I want to discuss is stigma. So, what is stigma? Stigma is an idea or belief that is falsely held about a condition, diagnosis, experience, that gives it a bad name, or gives it a name that makes people not want to talk about it. And this is perfectly illustrated in the life of Kanye West. Stick with me, stick with me. Some of y'all are way too comfortable saying things like, oh, well, he always uses his mental illness as an excuse, da 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 da. Let me tell you something, okay? Let me tell you something. What I've learned is that bipolar disorder is manageable. And the more money you have, the more resources you have, the likelier you have a full medical team with you, more likely it is that you have access to really good rehabilitation centers, medication on deck. Like, you have access to all of these things. So I want people to be aware. The issue is not that he's manic or he's having an episode, or the issue is that he's not taking care of his mental illness. That's the issue. So I believe public figures with such an influence and impact, they do need us to hold them to account. And if he's doing things that are harming people, which he has, and saying things that incite hate and violence, that shouldn't mean that people who share his diagnosis should be associated with that simply because everybody talks about it. Everybody talks about, well, he's bipolar and, da 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 da. Or like, he needs to stop hiding behind that. And it's like, no, what he needs to do is take care of his mental illness. That's what he needs to do. I think people think you're kind of a lost cause when you have bipolar disorder. Like, you're a loose cannon, unpredictable. That's why he's like that. That's why he says things that are harmful to people. And it's almost like, can somebody put him away so we don't have to deal with his hurtful words and actions? That's what it feels like when people honestly ridicule and draw out his mental illness. And I'm using him as an example to kind of paint a picture of what stigma looks like. You won't hear from me that everything he's doing is excusable and acceptable, never. But in simply understanding and reframing, there's a difference between holding someone to account by pointing out their mental illness and holding someone to account by drawing attention to the fact that it can be managed. He has access to that and he's not using that access. That's the issue. So that's just an example, using bipolar as an adjective. I know it's kind of fun and funny to use the word delulu, but delusion is a real symptom of bipolar disorder, and it's incredibly terrifying to not be able to distinguish between reality and delusion. And I feel like people are too comfortable making these words so easy to use and so like interchangeable with words like, my emotions are all over the place today. Instead of just saying that, you say, oh, I'm so bipolar, or oh, he's so bipolar, or whatever. It's like, that's not what bipolar disorder is like. It's not like I'm living on a roller coaster every single day, especially not when it's treated. So I'm going to share some symptoms of bipolar disorder with you, so that there's a connection between the stigma and the symptoms, because people like to draw the symptoms out of context, and that's what creates the stigma. So, talked about stigma. Now we're going to talk about the symptoms. So, bipolar disorder is a spectrum. And I will put the spectrum here. So this is the spectrum of bipolar disorder, and there are many different symptoms that somebody can experience with bipolar disorder. And those range from delusion to no impulse control, and I'll kind of get into some of that. But if you are interested in just like having quick facts on hand about bipolar disorder, International Bipolar account on Instagram is a really great resource. They break down the symptoms and the signs very clearly, and they always refer you to seek medical advice. Bipolar disorder is not like a diagnosis you might receive in talk therapy. It requires a referral to a psychiatrist. It requires evaluation that's different than talk therapy and outside of talk therapy. So when somebody is having an episode, there are different episodes. There's a mixed episode, there is mania, and there's depression. And different clinical terms in between, but I'm going to give you guys what is off the dome. So when somebody's having a mixed episode, it means they're experiencing symptoms of mania and depression kind of interchangeably. The thing that qualifies as an episode is if your symptoms have lasted longer than a few days. It can be even a few weeks, and in some cases, like myself, it can even be a few months. So that's one symptom of bipolar disorder, is an episode. What goes on in an episode? Okay, so if somebody's manic, it doesn't mean that they're happy and excited and jumping off the walls. It means that they have a lot of energy going on that their body cannot keep up with. So you can be struggle with insomnia for like a week, but have all the energy in the world. And it sucks because mentally your mind is like going so fast, but your body is drained because your body's like, you think you have rested and you have energy, but we're depleted, you know? And it's different from insomnia, because when people struggle with insomnia, they usually do have the blowback in the day of like, ugh, I'm so tired, dude. Like, I didn't get any sleep. And so you struggle with it. But when you're manic and you have insomnia, you have energy to spare. Another symptom is impulsive behavior. So some people with bipolar disorder run through all their money, savings, go bankrupt because of spending and gambling. Some people, like myself, make major life choices that alter and impact more than just themselves. And so all that is due to delusion, right? Like, your brain doesn't have that stop of being like, this isn't okay. Your brain just kind of goes for it. And that's why you'll see people with bipolar disorder creating new businesses and new ideas and going through all these things that they may not have the resources for, time for, experience. They're just gonna go for it. Another symptom is talking a lot and calling people that you haven't talked to in years. I remember when I was in an episode, I was like on a phone marathon. Like, I was on the phone with a hotline almost around the clock. I was calling friends that I hadn't spoken to in like 10 years and just like chopping it up with them like I just talked with them last Wednesday. Like, it was literally like I was on the phone and I would not get tired. Like, I wouldn't get tired of talking. It would just be consistent and constant. Another one is delusion. And the way I can describe delusion is it's like you're behind the wheel, but somebody else is driving your car. And if you see them going for a dangerous situation, like they're about to crash or they're about to drive off the road and over a bridge or something, you can't stop it. That's delusion. And that's why it's not funny, because it's terrifying. It's terrifying to physically feel like you're in the driver's seat, but mentally something else is driving. Another thing with mania is you kind of just, you forget about the people around you and the people you love. I know for me, my personal life was brought into the workplace, and although I have worked with amazing people who are very generous and thought and care, it's something I'm never going to get back, and it's something that has impacted my career. You know, and it's incredibly heartbreaking to think that I shared so much about my personal life in a very vulnerable time in my life. So those are some symptoms. Here are more. I'm gonna like just attach an image here with more symptoms that are included in bipolar disorder. The important thing about bipolar disorder is that you cannot just like look at the symptoms and, oh yeah, that's me. You have to talk to somebody about it who can be like medically able to diagnose you, because sometimes we see things online and we're like, oh yeah, that's totally me. But the thing is, with these symptoms, they have to be like really intense, and they have to have happened from time to time over a long period of time too. Symptoms usually present themselves in your later 20s, and after you're 18 is when symptoms really present themselves. So, but for me, I feel like I knew I was bipolar from the time I was a child. You know, I just didn't know what it was, but I knew the way I experienced emotions and my mood was not normal. But when I did turn 18 and after that, I did notice like it became more active. So those are some symptoms. I could like make an entire video about symptoms alone. So let me know through this whole video, let me know if there's like one chapter that you're like, can you talk about that a little more? So those are the symptoms. Okay, I'm back and I wanted to talk about medication, because a certain politician has made false claims and accusations about medication. People on meds needing to go to a wellness farm to detox from their medication, youth and children on ADHD medicine are being abused by their parents, yada, 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 like so many things that are fabricated. So I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about medication. But before I do want to touch on what psychosis is. So psychosis is not just something folks with bipolar disorder experience. People with other mood disorders can also experience psychosis. And it's basically when somebody is not in the right state of mind, they're believing things to be true that are not factual, and they're absolutely convinced that that is reality. Not their opinion, not their perspective, but like they're living in that. So that can look like seeing things, hearing things. For me, it looked like very high paranoia. But just having a glimpse into what psychosis is can help understand folks who are in it better. Like, I'm sure we've all seen somebody in the busy part of town or the city on the street corner shouting at the wind, and some folks find it funny, but it's not funny. It's actually really sad because psychosis is a very terrifying place to be. And as someone who experienced psychosis, I had the privilege of undergoing that in my private life and getting private medical help. But folks who are experiencing psychosis out in the open in such a vulnerable way, like, it's just really heartbreaking. It's like putting all of your weaknesses out on display. So next time you see someone who's experiencing psychosis in public, just know that it's not because they're like these crazy, scary people. They're experiencing something crazy and scary and unbelievable too. So yeah, that's a little bit of what psychosis is. When folks with bipolar disorder are experiencing psychosis, they might be experiencing hypersexuality. They might be wanting to be very impulsive, more than the average person. And I thought that would be really important to know because, again, those are flags for you and those you love. So that's a little bit about what psychosis is. And now to the medication. So I kind of knew I needed to be on medication after I had my first baby. I actually experienced perinatal mood disorder, which I felt in my bones was a real thing because I was experiencing it. I'd only heard of postpartum, which is after you have the baby, but when I was pregnant, I noticed my moods, and it wasn't just like, oh, pregnancy hormones that come and go. It was like really, really difficult to navigate and manage. And I feel like more research about it has come out publicly in the years after I was pregnant, and it's kind of like, great. I would have loved to have known about that, but I'm glad it's getting out there. The message is getting out there. So I had perinatal mood disorder, and then of course I had postpartum mood disorder. So I was talking to my therapist, who at the time was attached to like the maternity ward at the hospital I gave birth at. And she was talking about maybe it's time to explore medication. And here's where, for Black and Latina women, we're failed, because talk therapy has become so accessible now, which is great. But when you need like long-term care for your mental health, it's really important that we're not misdiagnosed and that we have access and understanding on the steps to take to get actual, substantial, sustainable help, which is part of why I'm creating this video too. So she said I needed medication, didn't send me a referral, didn't explain how to do that, just kind of said, yeah, look into it with your insurance, see if you can see a psychiatrist, which is not helpful. And knowing my dad's story, who died by suicide, and he was taking medication, that's all I knew about his story. So I was like, I'm not taking medication. Like, I don't want to become dependent on it, which is another misinformation about it. So that was kind of was running through my mind. And so it wasn't until 3 years later when I was experiencing my rapid cycling of episodes and impulsive behavior, decisions, psychosis. When all of that came to a head, I had no choice but to go to the emergency room and then be transferred to a psych ward. And I'm going to do an entire video about that experience because it was absolutely insane, no pun intended, and it just shouldn't be. It honestly shouldn't be. And I do want people to know what it was like. So one, you know how to advocate for yourself should you ever be in that situation, and two, that you're not afraid to take that step because it is necessary when you need real help. So yeah, went to the hospital, and the first hospital I went to was horrible. They misdiagnosed me, put me on the wrong medication, and that's actually how we found out I for sure have bipolar disorder, because they only had me on antidepressants, and that can backfire if you have bipolar disorder. So I was right back into the hospital, but I went to a different mental hospital because the first one was genuinely horrible. So the second one, I got the right diagnosis, and I was prescribed 3 types of medication: an antipsychotic, a mood stabilizer, and an antidepressant. When all those work together, what they do is they manage my mania, and they manage my depression. And then that's what the mood stabilizer does, is it balances out the antidepressant, and then the antipsychotic is what I take at night before bed to help me not have restless sleep and also help keep me in this right state of mind, you know, because so that's what my medication does for me. And I'm really proud to say that I've been on it consistently for 1.5 years, and that's just part of my treatment plan. I also do acupuncture. I also do therapy. It's a lot, and nobody in my family has ever done intensive care like this. I also went through an intensive outpatient program, which is like group therapy, 3 hours a day, and I did that for I think 2 months right after I got out of the hospital, which is the best time to do it. So all of this was uncharted territory for me, but I'm proud of myself for creating a holistic treatment plan. And that's another thing about medication. You really can't recover with just medication alone. You have to be constantly talking to a psychiatrist about your symptoms, because it does take a while to find the right dose. Some people experience certain side effects with certain medication, so it's good to be in conversation and be like, hey, like this particular medication is making me feel really lethargic, or this particular medication is kind of not helping with my energy levels. Like when you're meeting with someone regularly who adjusts your meds, you get to find the right dose. As well as a therapist. I worked with a therapist who specifically worked with folks with mood disorders. So we were able to talk through an emergency plan. We were able to talk through that first year when I was out of the hospital and recovering. She was right by my side, and yeah, now I'm switched to a narrative therapist, which is like a more creative and fun therapy, which I'm excited to say that I graduated to just like regular therapy and not like close monitoring therapy, because it means that my bipolar disorder is in remission. So yeah, it's been really great, you know, and I think my moods can be unpredictable. They can be difficult when I'm in particularly stressful environments or going through a stressful life change. But the belief that people with bipolar disorder cannot manage it is why I'm making this video. Every day I manage my bipolar disorder, and it's a choice, and I learned the hard way how to access help. And I don't want people who look like me to have to learn the hard way how to access help, because if I hadn't been going to therapy 10 years before this, I would not have the energy to navigate intensive care, like real help. And I just don't want that to be the case for anybody. I want enough of us to be informed before we need help so that mental health patients are treated better. You know, when I was in the hospital, I was treated like I was incapable of making my own decisions. I was treated, they were surprised to hear that I had a job and a home and a family. Like, there's just the way they prejudge their patients is not right. So if more of us are informed when we get help, maybe we can make the system a little better. And I started this video talking about a celebrity, and I'm going to end this video talking about a celebrity. You know, one of the particular resources that I feel does a really good job of erasing the stigma and making mental health just a part of regular conversation is Selena Gomez's organization Wondermind, and her documentary My Mind and Me helped me see, like, oh, some of the ways that she's talking to her friends and her loved ones is how I've talked to people when my moods were out of whack or when I'm in an episode, you know? So I feel like it's awesome that she's presented these resources, but she is still a white passing Latina with a lot of money and power. And it's unfortunate that her organization doesn't talk about, like, next step help, you know, beyond therapy, because that needs to be more accessible. You know, everyday therapy and help is really great to normalize, but there's a lot of us who need serious help, serious psychiatric help. And I just wish she would make that more accessible, because I know, you know, her and other celebrities have been checked into the mental hospital, and I'm sure that part of her ongoing care was a nice rehab center or maybe in-home care. But for those of us who don't have that at the ready, it would be great to pay for people to stay at the mental hospital, pay for people to vet mental hospitals, and make sure that patients are getting the advocacy that they need. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I would advocate for if I had my own foundation. And so I just want to make it clear that this is the kind of stuff we need as people of color, in the Black community, in the Indigenous community, in the Latino community, and other communities who are marginalized. You know, we need this information because we are disproportionately, our mental health is disproportionately impacted by the racism we face, the systemic injustices that we face, and we need to normalize this conversation. You know, there's a well-known celebrity within the Black community who is constantly being targeted as being unlikable, and she goes on rants. You know, she's highly intelligent and she goes on rants online, and sometimes I watch them and I recognize symptoms of a mood disorder. Not to discredit anything she shares, but it's just clear that something more is going on. And I came across this thread that basically people were like, you know, oh, what is wrong with her? Like, yes, it does matter if you're likable or not, no matter what she says, da 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 da. But I came across one comment that somebody was like, she needs help. And I just thought to myself, there it is. There it is. That is exactly why I didn't get help. Because when people within our community say you need help, it's derogatory. It's not genuine, and we don't even know how to get help. So when we say you need help, it kind of sounds like you need to be in a straitjacket, you know? And it's just, it shouldn't be that way. It really should not be that way. So as long as you're here sticking with me on my channel, you're gonna hear stories about how I got help, and how it's something I'm proud of. I'm just as proud to know that I have graduated intensive care and am in recovery with my bipolar disorder. I'm just as proud as that as I am of being a mother, or as I am of graduating college, you know, being the first to graduate from college in my family. Like, these are the things that I'm proud of because they took everything within me and it took a lot of bravery and perseverance, and I'm proud of that. And I want anyone watching this who resonates to also be proud of any step you're taking to get help. And getting help is not a bad thing. It's not something to let your fear stop you from pursuing, because it's worth it. It's really worth it. And, you know, 5 years from now, I might have a different development in my story. But I do know this, as long as you really do believe in yourself and believe that your health is worth it, things really do turn around. So thank you for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions. That will give me like an idea of like what else I can make videos about. I already have some ideas, but I would love to hear what you would like to see and what you would find helpful. So thanks for watching.